Hello, it's Georgetta Gancars here, and today I'm going to be doing a palette knife painting, and I'm going to be using my Arpoli paints and some other paints. And I wanted to show you the different types of palette knives that I have. So I have a large variety of different types of palette knives, and I wrote 2 books on painting with the palette knife, and I will go over that later, but I just want to show you the different types of shapes. Some of them are a little bit elongated. They hold more paint on the canvas. Some of them have an arch. I even have one that is plastic. And some of them are smaller in size. So I want to go over the simple way that I would start a palette knife painting. And what I do is I have a canvas here. And I want to start basically with an outline. So I would kind of draw the outline and kind of mask out the areas that I would want my painting to look like. So if I'm doing a mountain, I might draw the shape of the mountain. I might just draw the outer edges of the mountain area. If I had a house, I might just draw the outer edges of the house and just the basic shapes. And what I do is I use 2 different types of pencils to do that. If I want to have the color on the canvas and I'm figuring, okay, I know that I want this roof on this house to be red, I might use watercolor pencils because I can draw on them on the canvas and it really doesn't take anything. I can cover it with the paint very easily. So just a basic watercolor colored pencil, or you can use regular drawing pencils. But when you're using the drawing pencils, you'll see like some of the drawing pencils here, they go from light to dark. I usually use the lightest pencil so I can cover that, and that's just the way that I kind of would start my canvas. So we're going to be doing, and after you have that, you want to have your colors recorded down. So I tell students that when we did our little color swatches, you want to have those ready and available. You can choose colors if you want to by looking at the color wheel. If you want to do a contrasting painting with colors, more like the Impressionists were using, or you can do something that's quite simple, that might be monochromatic, but you want to really start your colors before you start the painting, so you can put them on. The next thing that you want to have that should be available would be your color swatches. So you would make your little color swatches, and you can do this when we mix the colors at home, where you kind of already have your color swatches and you know exactly where you're going to put them on the painting. So you can do a little square on your canvas if you had the mountain of the color there. So you know exactly where the color is going to be, because therefore when you make it on your palette, you have your colors together and you can just pick up the color right away and put it there. It makes the process a little bit easier. When you're doing palette knife painting, it's always easier to do it that way, because what ends up happening is you take too long mixing the colors. And of course, you have to have enough of the color. Now, sometimes you can prepare the canvas ahead of time, so you can use gesso if you want to use a certain kind of texture with the knife. You can also use white acrylic paint and let it dry if you're using an acrylic, if you're painting with acrylics with the palette knife. I like using acrylics with the palette knife because it dries faster. You can use oils, but it takes a little bit longer to dry, and you'd have to add a drying agent, speeding agent, to your oils to make it work. The other thing you could kind of purchase besides using gesso would be something like, I'll see you, it's like a modeling kind of paste here, and it's very, very thick, and it's a little bit thicker than gesso, and it's white, and it looks like a very thick plaster. And you could put the texture of what you wanted to on your canvas ahead of time, then let that dry, and then paint on top. The wonderful thing about putting the modeling paste or the gesso or applying texture on a canvas before you paint it is then you can take your palette knife and you can load it up with a color and just move it across the canvas once you have that texture set up, and it only takes on the edges of the raised texture that you made. So it's kind of interesting. The other thing is you can recycle canvases. So this is a demo that I did, a fast minute demo for Impressionist painting and the texture. And if you look really close, you have all of this thick texture on here with the brush. Well, you could take a palette knife and you can use an old canvas and you could just literally go over this very lightly, because this texture, if I touch it, it's very raised. The paint is so thick, and you could go over here with another color and it would only pick up on those raised edges. So it's a lot of different things that you could do to prepare the canvas ahead of time. You could also use sand, and if you had gesso, you could put gesso on the canvas. You could throw sand on top and let the sand dry into the gesso, then do another layer of a thin layer of gesso on top, throw more sand, and then let that dry and put a thin layer of gesso on top. The other thing that you will need is a blow dryer or a heat gun. This is a heat gun. It's actually a paint stripper. They sell it in paint stores for about, this is a larger one, it's about $24, but the smaller ones run anywhere from like $12 to $15. And it's like a hair dryer. It usually comes on like 2 settings, a low and a high. Some come low, medium, and high. I usually leave it on the high setting, and when I'm blow drying my canvas, I would take my canvas and I will blow dry it, moving this heat gun back and forth about 6 inches from the canvas. I never want to put the heat gun here. It's very, very hot. And I obviously don't want to use it as a hair dryer, because that would not be good. You would singe your hair. So, but it does work for painting, for the oil paints, and they will dry within about 5 minutes. Okay, but don't put it too close. The other thing is you want to make sure that you have a really good attachment, because a lot of the heat guns, they come with these like 3 prongs instead of 2. So it's kind of frustrating if you go home and you don't have a 3-prong plug. So kind of notice ahead of time what kind of prong you have. And if you're not near a light switch, if your studio space is not near a light switch, you're going to have to get an extension cord. So make sure that you realize what kind of plug that it has before so you can buy the proper extension cord so it can be grounded safely. And that's something that's very important. The other thing is you don't want to have like a lot of things going on at once. When you're using the heat gun, it takes a lot of power. So if you have a light above, that's fine. But you don't want to have on, like, you know, the light going, I don't know, your dishwasher, you know, you're washing your clothes, the washing machine. You don't want to have that much, because you don't want to blow a fuse, okay? But usually, you know, with a regular light on, this is okay. Okay, so those are some of the things that you need to get ready to set up for your palette knife painting. And then of course you would need, as we spoke in the other videos, your palette, remembering how to separate your colors from each other. You should not have, with mixing colors, when you're using the palette knife, you really need about 2 inches away from each other, so you have enough space to mix. And if you're using acrylics, you can add other things to increase the transparency of your paint, so you don't lose the color of the paint, but you still keep the thickness. And if you wanted to add things, you could add a gel medium, or sometimes they call it acrylic gel medium or a gloss gel. I like using the acrylic gel medium or the gloss gel, and I like using the glossy one because the matte one is very, very flat, and it doesn't really work as well. You'll lose the gloss in the painting, okay? And if you want to varnish it, it kind of works against that. So again, acrylic gel medium, and if you use 50% of the acrylic gel medium and 50% of the acrylic paint, it's just an extender. It will double the amount of paint that you have, so you'll save money. And if you use about 75 to 80% of the acrylic gel medium or gloss gel, you will extend the paint, but the paint will become very transparent. So if you use red with 80% of acrylic gel medium and only 20% of paint, you would have a very light pink, but you would have a lot of paint. Okay, so that's something that if you're going to be working and using lots of paint, that you really should think about in the future, so you can save a lot of money. Otherwise, you'll just have to keep buying more paint. So again, remember, 2 inches apart from the color. each color when you're working on your palette, so you have enough space to mix. You should have a variety of knives. I usually have one that is a little bit larger. You can have one that is kind of like a standard knife. And then you would need a smaller knife for those smaller strokes. But you can, nowadays there's so many different types of palette knives. For example, this is a half blade. This is really good for defining edges. It's kind of like if you're trying to make really good lines. It's also good for pressure. The larger brushes are good for doing smooth washes across the canvas, or smooth areas, making it look very smooth. Like if you had a very good brush that was very soft. And the smaller ones are a little bit more precision, because you can use the tip of the knife. And you can get in those places that you might not be able to get in with the larger knife. Okay, so I will see you in the next video, where we will be doing a couple of demos about the palette knife.